הנה כל ישועתי, הבטח ולא אפחד, כי עוזי וזמרתך השם, ויהי לי ישועה, ושבתם מים בששון.
A good vach, Shavua Tov. Hello, my holy sisters and brothers. Wishing you a great week to come. We've just come out of Shabbos. That was the Maccabees and Netanel Hirschtick singing the Havdalah prayer that we sing at the end of Shabbos. That was recorded on YouTube as part of the Shabbos Project, a beautiful, beautiful effort that comes every year and allows people around the world to participate and to pledge to participate, for Jews around the world to participate in a complete Shabbos. Beautiful organization. If you haven't heard of it, I'm not sure when they're doing it this year. When is the Shabbos Project? But one Shabbos a year. It's like a big dedicated effort to get Jews around the world to commit to Shabbos. It's beautiful. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house with us tonight? Ed Berg says shalom from Galloway, New Jersey. NJ Vess is with us from Greenville, Texas. Marina Gonzalez says Shavua Tov. Harold Black says Shavua Tov from Roseburg, Oregon. Bill Eldridge says shalom from rural Arkansas. Wi-Fi comes Thursday, but somehow I'm getting just enough signal to catch this tonight. Monica Weish is with us from New Mexico. Chaim Lee. Why would I talk about that? That's not the subject for tonight at all. Christo Cheney says Shavua Tov from Lubbock, Texas, turning in for the night, but I will catch the recording tomorrow after morning prayers. Have a good week, everyone. Monica, Alice Gross says happy Sunday in Baltimore. Stephanie Marie Diaz, Shavua Tov. Sue Strauss in the house from Chicago. Gwen Strong says good evening. Melissa Eitel Jurin says shalom from Great Neck, New York. Sharon Fran Brooks, shalom from Chicago. Zara Gopio Melgar says hi from the Philippines. Marjorie Holler's with us saying shalom from Georgia. I think that the comment was, when am I going to say something about people like Madoff and Epstein and what's his name, the former head of Miramax Pictures? I mean, all I can say is when high-profile Jews commit heinous crimes, is that we're ashamed. It's a shanda. It's a terrible reflection on us. I would think that any people is ashamed of when one of its members publicly disgraces himself. Of course, it's a horrible reflection on us all. But what I can definitely say about those Jews who have been mentioned is that there was really no Judaism in their lives at all. And perhaps if there had been, they wouldn't have gone so egregiously astray. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, we are holding, oh my goodness, we are on Daf 155, Kuf Nun Hey, in Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. 155 means that tomorrow, God willing, is 156. And Monday is 157, the final page, the final daf of Tractate Shabbos. So definitely you want to be with us on Monday evening. It's going to be an hour later than usual, about 7 p.m. Pacific time, as we celebrate the completion of our journey through Tractate Shabbos. You also want to be with us tomorrow, where there's going to be a fascinating discussion, a little bit of Jewish astrology, what it means depending on what day of the week you were born and what hour of the day you were born. We're going to get some fascinating insight from our sages. Tonight, however, we are continuing our discussion. The flow of chapter 24 is all about what may we do for our animals on Shabbos. I mean, we're really trying to not do any work at all, if possible, on Shabbos. And in an agricultural society, feeding the animals can be quite a bit of work. But we have a sort of competing obligation. On the one side, we want to honor Shabbat and sanctify it and keep it as sacred and no work at all, if possible. But on the other hand, we have a responsibility to our animals. It's a Torah obligation to inflict no suffering on our animals. And there's no reason why Shabbos would be a fast day for our animals. So, of course, we can feed our animals. We must feed our animals. In fact, we need to feed our animals before we eat. So just how far does the permit to feed our animals extend when it seems like we're doing work that would otherwise be a violation of Shabbos? Let me just turn on that do not disturb over there. Excuse me. Okay. And especially in an agrarian society where most people are farmers, feeding animals can definitely take on the look and feel of work, like the work of the week. So the rabbis are going to make sure, the sages are going to make sure that the animals get fed, but that we distinguish Shabbos from the other days of the week. So let's continue. Today we're going to be looking at Mishnahs 2 and 3 here in chapter 24. In Mishnah number 2, we learn we can untie bundles of grain and spread them before the animals so that they can eat. This is in the case where if those bundles of grain were not untied, or if we did not spread the food out before the animals, the animals could otherwise not eat. And we understand that principle is at work when we hear that we may not crush carobs or hay for the animals on Shabbos. Why? Because those foods are soft enough that the animals can eat them. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, but we may crush carobs for a young animal, a small animal who could not eat them otherwise. And so here we see the general principle that we can render what is inedible edible so that the animal can eat. But we may not exert ourselves once the food is edible. We don't go the extra distance to make the food better, right? So our animals are not going to get premium food for us. And it makes sense because when you're talking about feeding animals, especially on a farm, premium food, that's really not so much an act of love as it is you're fattening the animal to make it more valuable. And that's something we're not going to do on Shabbos. It's going to have enough to eat so that it doesn't go hungry, the animal is happy. But we're not going to go out of our way to give it extra good food, extra premium food. We're not going to give it extra grinding. Once it becomes edible for the animal, that's enough. That's the principle. Interestingly, for a dog. Now, It says the dog is singled out to be mentioned in this Gemara, and it says that if we're going to give a carcass of something that died, right? Dogs eat meat. So if some other animal died and we're going to feed its carcass to the dog, if the dog can just get into that, the animal that died and bite it and chew meat out of it and eat it, so then we don't have to do anything. But if it's a small dog and some kind of large animal that died, and we need to cut the meat out of it in order to give it to the dog, so that's going to be permitted. Now, the dog might have been able to eat some other food. Why are we going out of our way to give it some meat from this carcass that we might otherwise not be, it's an animal that died. And it says in the Gemara, even if the animal died on Shabbos, something that died on Shabbos, that's muktzah. We just do not touch it. We would absolutely not touch it. Why is it that we can cut meat from a carcass of an animal that died on Shabbos? For the dog, dogs have special privileges. They actually have special privileges. And so even though we learned a few days ago that really pious Jews will generally refrain, not always, but will generally refrain from owning dogs and cats, but especially dogs, for various reasons, now we're also learning, but the dog gets a special privilege. Why? Because it says in the Torah that at the time that the children of Israel were going out of Egypt, right? We were enslaved in Egypt, and the Lord heard our cries, and he sent Moses to redeem us. And the Lord pulled us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And that was the plagues, right? The 10 miraculous plagues were inflicted on our oppressors, and that enabled us to leave Egypt. The 10th plague, which is the one that triggered the departure, was the slaying of the firstborn of Egypt. And it says, where is it? I think it's Exodus chapter 11, verse 7. And it says that, right after saying that the angel of death will go through the land and smite the firstborn, and it says, so basically paraphrasing, all the firstborn of Egypt will be slain, but against the Israelites, no dog shall whet its tongue. Sometimes translated as no dog shall even snarl at the children of Israel. And the next verse is, so that it will be known that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. So since God chose the dog to be the symbol, to be the sign of this distinction, right? It was enough of a distinction that their firstborn died and ours didn't. How did the angel of death know which house to go in, which one's not? Because there was the blood of the paschal sacrifice, of the paschal lamb or goat, that we put a little bit of its blood on the lintel, right, on the doorway of our homes. And that was the signal that the angel should pass over the Jewish homes. That's why we have the holiday of Passover. And that's why we put the mezuzah on our door frames. But it also says, and specifically, and that no dog shall even whet its tongue against Israel, so that it shall be known that God distinguishes between Egypt and Israel. And so dogs are singled out for special favor in the Torah, and here we see a little bit of a special privilege for the dogs. And that takes us through our discussion. It's a short discussion of Mishnah number 2. Tonight's show is going to be short. If you have questions or comments, get them in the comments now. Mishnah number 3. As we discussed, we may not go out of our way to feed the animals, right? Because that's for our benefit, not for the animals. We just make sure that they're fed, and then we don't exert extra. So Mishnah number 3 discusses that we may not overfeed the animal. We may not force feed the animal. Why would you want to overfeed an animal? An example is given. Somebody who's going on a journey through the desert will actually stuff food into a camel. Okay, I guess that's a practice that people did before long journeys. It kind of makes sense. They're going to be away from food for a long time. And I guess maybe it was possible to make the camel eat more than it would normally eat and not hurt it, because they're able to travel on it for long distances through the desert. But we may not do that on Shabbos. And it makes sense, because if we were preparing for a long journey through the desert, we wouldn't do that on Shabbos anyway, because we don't do anything on Shabbos that prepares for, particularly for work, but really for anything that's going to happen after Shabbos. Shabbos is about Shabbos. We don't do things on Shabbos to prepare for later, even if they were things that would be permitted on Shabbos itself. So we wouldn't stuff food into the camel. We would only feed the camel as much as it wants to eat. We don't force feed at all, even if it wouldn't lead to overfeeding. What is the principle? We can put food in the mouth of an animal, especially if it's an animal that's standing up and it might not be able to get at the food if we just put it on the ground for whatever reason. We can bring the food to the animal's mouth. We can even put the food in the animal's mouth, but you can only put food in an animal's mouth in such a way that the animal has the choice whether to spit it out or not. If you had some kind of a system of putting food in a spot in the animal's mouth where it would have to swallow it, not allowed on Shabbos, right? Because that would be our benefit, not the animals. Yeah. Okay. With regard to domesticated chickens and geese, we can feed them. Of course, we can feed them. But doves in a dovecote, we may not feed on Shabbos. Why? Because the chickens and the domesticated geese, right? Domesticated chickens, domesticated geese, they live on our farm. They live in our chicken coop or hen coop, whatever. So feeding them is our responsibility. They're not going to get their food unless we give them the food. But doves in a dovecote, you can open the dovecote and they're trained to go fly and get their own food. So if the animal can get its own food by itself, so then we're going out of our way to feed the animal. We don't do that on Shabbos. You might do it during the week, but if the animal can get its own food, you don't do that on Shabbos. An example is also given, like if somebody keeps bees, you don't give them water. I don't know if beekeepers give their bees water, but in case people did, I guess they must have because it's mentioned here. But you wouldn't do it on Shabbos because the bees are perfectly capable of going somewhere where the water is and getting what they need. Do bees drink water? I didn't know that, but I guess it's possible. And now we learned you can't put water before them on Shabbos because they can get it themselves. The Gemara also says on Shabbos we may not feed a pig. We can feed all the other animals, but we may not feed a pig. Why? Why is the pig distinguished? Not because the pig shouldn't eat, but because the sages assume that Jews don't raise pigs. So we're not going to feed somebody else's pig, because as we see, we only feed animals whose food we are responsible for. We're not responsible for somebody else's animal, and so we don't feed that other person's animal. And since Jews don't raise pigs, there should never be a reason to feed a pig on Shabbos. And finally, if feeding the animals requires that we mix water and bran, right? So bran, I guess, is some kind of wheat product or oats. What wheat bran, oat bran? I mean, it's basically grain. So if some animals eat a mixture of water and bran, and let's say that during the week, what we would do is we would add water to the bran and then mix it up really thoroughly. So on Shabbos, this is a problem because mixing water and bran thoroughly is more or less creating a dough-like product, and therefore we're kneading dough, and that is absolutely prohibited on Shabbos. So if the animal eats a mixture of water and bran, on Shabbos, we just add water to the bran. We can maybe even pass a utensil through it once or twice, but there's no thorough mixing. The animal, it's going to be able to eat it. It won't be maybe as good as during the week, but with water and bran in the same container, the animal's going to do well enough. It's not going to starve. It's going to eat on that day. And we avoid the possibility of coming to knead dough, K-N-E-A-D, kneading dough. Okay, that's actually all I've got for us tonight. Tomorrow's discussion is going to be a fair bit longer, I think. It'll be fascinating when we get into Jewish astrology. What does it say based what day of the week you were born on or what hour of the day you were born on? And a few fascinating teachings that grow out of that. That's going to be in tomorrow's daf. And Monday, 7 p.m., about an hour later than usual, we're going to be making our siyum, our completion of Tractate Shabbos, God willing, when we hit page 157. Let's take your comments and questions. Just a couple. Hinda Ader, I have a book on it, Signs of the Times on Jewish Astrology. I've seen that book. Excellent book. Bill Eldridge, wouldn't force feeding also violate the Torah prohibition on animal cruelty? I guess not. I don't know look, I'm not a farmer. I don't know. It's certainly if you're force feeding in a way that really hurts the animal, so that would seem that it would violate the Torah at any time. But maybe, making an animal eat more than it would want to, I don't know, maybe it's just not so bad. Maybe it's just part of what people do who raise animals. I have heard that the beef that we eat, doesn't live such a happy life. Maybe that's just part of it. But at any rate, we don't do that on Shabbos. I just don't know that much about how people raise animals and how they feed them. Okay, my friends, that's it. It's a quick show tonight. Very excited to get back together with you tomorrow. It's going to be a fascinating show. And Monday, there's some great teachings right at the end of the book. And then we're making our siyum. So Monday night, you should have a drink in hand. If you've made this whole journey with us, we're going to make a l'chaim together. It's nice if you have, some like cookie or, some kind of a wheat product that you can eat along with it. We'll make a little bit of a celebration. There's a special song that Moshe Storch recorded just for us in celebrating the siyum. And then we'll read just a little bit the first Mishnah of our next tractate, which is Eruvin. The tractate Eruvin will just, because as soon as you finish a tractate, you got to start the next one. So we'll just open but then our real discussion of the first page of Eruvin will happen on Tuesday. That's what I've got for us tonight. You should all be blessed with such a sweet week. You're already off to a great start. Good vach